I'm Ray Hill, and I joined KPFT in 1968, and we actually got a transmitter and got on the air in 1970 and made our first broadcast then. I was one of the four original people who conceptualized the idea that we needed this kind of radio station in Houston. I was actually with the collective before Pacifica was. Pacifica joined the collective sometime after early 1968, when Deborah Danberg and I joined Larry Lee and Don Gardner, who were already in place, to create the idea. And then Don and Larry went to California and met the people from Pacifica and came back and said, if we come in under their umbrella, we don't have to create the administrative wing all to ourselves. We can ride their coattails. Seemed like a good idea. And I said, well, how compatible are they? And the first thing that came up was Pacifica stood for pacifism, because the founder of Pacifica Foundation, Lou Hill, back in the 40s, was a pacifist during World War II, which was a lot harder to be a pacifist during World War II than it would be subsequently in our era, in the Vietnam era and subsequently. So I strongly adhered to pacifist principles and understood Pacifica. Right away, I became a member of KPFT's local board, and I studied the history of not only Pacifica Foundation, but of Blue Hill personally, and of all that background. Right now, there's controversy in the station again. Well, that's not new either. There has been controversy around the idea of freedom of expression for as long as I can remember. God only knows I have like 3 federal cases, including the Supreme Court of the United States case, Hill versus Houston, that deals with the First Amendment and protecting it from assaults by government and freedom of expression among people. Pacifica and KPFT are my kind of place. I belong here. I think I'm the only former manager, except maybe Steve, who was former engineer and general manager for a few weeks, that is welcome in this building. Because what happens to Pacifica managers is they overstay their welcome. They misconstrue what their role is here. Managing KPFT is a public service, a personal sacrifice. It is not a career. And it's difficult to do because you have very strong-willed people with very strong opinions about things, and you've got to herd those cats in the same direction to operate the radio station. Having been manager, I would not want to be manager again, because I have done my share of sacrifice and have no intention of repeating that anymore. But at the same token, managers have to make decisions. The Federal Communications Commission holds the general manager of this radio station responsible for every word or utterance that goes out over the air. I don't care what rules Pacifica come up with and other kinds of things. The manager is responsible, and through the manager, the program director gets to decide what goes on the air. And generally speaking, I support those decisions. Now, I don't necessarily agree with them, but the whole idea of Pacifica is that if you don't hear things on this radio station that you find a little bit obnoxious, even offensive, then somebody's not doing it right. Because we're supposed to be a cacophony of conflicting voices frequently. It's how we deal with conflict that makes us Pacificans. I'm a pacifist. I abhor what is going on between Palestine and the Israeli nation. I abhor it because people are shooting and people are dying on both sides, although it is disproportionate number of Palestinians are dying in this conflict. I abhor it. It is war by any name. It is war. But like all wars and all conflicts, there is more than one side to every issue. Now, I listened this afternoon or this morning to the program that is being criticized. It was about the holiday season in Israel, and it was pleasant. It didn't even have anything to do with the name of the program, which is Voice of Peace or something of that nature. It didn't have any political content at all. It was It was fluff. And yes, it was presented by the Consul General of Israel. And guess what? We have done that before a lot. We used to have a regular scheduled program by the Alliance France, which happens to be next door and happens to be a part of the Pacifica community here in Montrose, and their official government consulate through the Alliance France had a regularly scheduled program on KPFT for years. Nobody complained about that. I remember when the folks from Pakistan came up and said, we need to have a Pakistani program. My God, you've got an Indian program. Well, we're from Pakistan, and it's not the same culture, and we want to have our own program. And so that was discussed around here for a long time, and finally the manager, and I believe the program director at the time, was the current manager at KPFT, put the Pakistanis on the air. And I listened. Their first program was all military music. And everything they said was that Pakistan needs to have an atomic bomb to protect itself, or maybe even to attack India. And I thought, how un-Pacifican. But we let it run, or they let it run. I wasn't in the decision-making position at the time. Pakistani program ran for several years. And the longer it run, the mellower it got. They never did change their position about Pakistan should have, and ultimately Pakistan did have, nuclear weapons. That didn't change. And they always opened their program with their national anthem, which is a military tome, marching music. But the rest of the program began to have a more cultural input, and it was an acceptable thing. We've had other consul generals. When I was general manager, we had the Czech consul here, and that's back before the emancipation of Eastern Europe from communist control. But then we had a gypsy program where a lot of Czechoslovakian music and language was being done, so I had the Czech consul in the station to participate in that process. So there's nothing new about KPFT having official wings of official governments all over the world in this building. We're Pacificans. We're pacifists. The way we resolve issues is not with confrontation and demands. And there's another thing that alarms me. As I'm making this tape, there is another programmer at KPFT trying to skew the audience of KPFT to the point of view that the producer of that program espouses on this issue. We used to call that the dirty laundry rule, and it has existed since the founding of Pacifica Foundation. If you want to discuss an issue in conflict at the radio station, then you have a broadcast town hall meeting where every point of view can be equally presented. It is not the prerogative of an individual programmer to go on the air and take a side to influence the listeners. I have volunteers on the prison show that want to go on the prison show and talk about this issue. That is not going to happen. We're going to talk about prisons on the prison show, as we have for the last 30 years. And the conflict within the station should be resolved by the station as a community, as a pacifist would approach the issue. We are Pacifica. We are pacifist, and we have always been pacifist. I don't care how strongly you feel about me and what I do, or about any other subject on this radio station and what those programmers do. We approach them not in confrontation, but as pacifists. We talk a lot, and we should be willing to talk about everything as a community and as a group. But the minute you start drawing up sides and pulling people to your opinion, you have overstepped your broadcast bounds on this station, in its history, and in its current operating rules. People who are arguing here are friends of mine. I think good friends. I did, however, get a call this afternoon that said, if you're not with us on killing this program, then you can no longer be my friend. Well, I'm sorry, but that's a choice that that person made. It's not a choice that I made. The choice that I made was, let's approach the issue as Pacificans and continue to broadcast as diverse a body of broadcast information as we can conceivably find and bring into this building. If that makes you uncomfortable and doesn't let us be friends, I'm sorry you have made that decision, but I'm sticking with the tried and true principles that has sustained this foundation now for well over 40 years.